Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ MV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We have a special guest in the building.
Yes.
Presidential candidate, 2020 presidential candidate, Tim Ryan. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us.
But he has a lot of political experience. Give him some of your political background, Tim, so they know.
17 years in the House of Representatives, 2 years in the Ohio State Senate.
Okay.
My district is in Northeast Ohio. It's Youngstown, Akron, so real working class district. And I've been slogging away, really trying to deal with a lot of the challenges that come from the income inequality, the loss of manufacturing, some of these older towns that have did really well for a while, but are back on their heels now.
So what made you want to jump into this race?
Well, listen, I've read a few articles over the last few days, and the articles are all asking one simple question. They say, why the hell is Tim Ryan running for president?
Yeah, why
they literally say, why the hell is he running for president?
Why did they say why the hell?
Yeah, why did they say why the hell?
Well, the Akron Beacon Journal in Ohio says that Tim Ryan is not well known in his district, has never had to ask for a statewide audience to vote for him, said your name recognition is low, your district is safe, so you never had to raise a lot of money. And the last and only time a sitting member of the U.S. House of Representatives was elected president was in 1880.
And yes, where was he from? He was from Ohio.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you.
I mean, here's the deal.
Damn, Charlamagne.
Well, you asked me why. Okay.
Here's the deal. These communities that I represent look a heck of a lot like a lot of the communities around the country. You got about 40 to 50% of American families today couldn't withstand a $400 or $500 emergency. Mm-hmm. And those are the people that I've represented. I've watched this economic train wreck happen. I think we need somebody in the White House who actually knows what's happened, knows the struggles that are going on in communities like the ones I represent, and has a plan on how to get us out of there. And I understand this as well, if not better, than anybody else because I've lived it my entire life.
What's the plan to get us out of there?
I'm sorry?
What is part of the plan to get us out of there?
Well, part of it is reinvesting back into the communities, but then having a plan on how to win the economy. Mm-hmm. You know, how to plug communities back into globalization. Globalization, automation have disenfranchised a lot of people. And so having a plan, and I've got plans around, an industrial policy in the United States that focuses on growing industry. So look at the electric vehicle market right now. We have 1 to 2 million electric vehicles in the world today. By 2030, we're going to have 30 million of them. Mm-hmm. Wind is growing at 30% a year. Solar is growing at 30% a year. We're getting our clock cleaned today by China. China controls 40% of the electric vehicle market, 60% of the solar panel market. So my plan is, how do you not only use the presidency to galvanize these issues to create an industrial policy, and then use the tax code to make sure that the growth is happening in distressed communities, communities of color, rural communities across the United States. Right now, venture capital, which is the big money that ramps up and scales up companies, primarily goes to 3 states, California, New York, and Massachusetts. 80% of it, 9% of it goes to women, and less than 2% go to people of color. If we're gonna close the income gap in the United States, if we're gonna provide opportunity, close that opportunity gap, we need to make sure that the private sector investment is getting to some of these communities, and I'm gonna work my rear end off to make sure that happens.
Question: why was Donald Trump able to bullshit people about bringing certain jobs back? Like, why did people fall for the whole coal miner thing?
I don't know if they necessarily believed that he was going to bring back the coal mines, bring back the steel mills, but that conversation was a direct economic conversation.
Yeah.
And the Democrats were talking about him. He was talking about people's economic condition. And when you have a choice to make, the person talking about you, who's rich, you got a plane, you got a name on buildings, it can't get any worse. I mean, the bottom 60% of people in the country have not had a raise since 1980. And he spoke to that anxiety.
So now, as far as African-American people, a lot of stuff that we have to deal with. Let's talk about with marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on marijuana and how we can start making money off of something that we've been arrested for so long now?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I supported medical marijuana in the state of Ohio, and am for complete legalization of marijuana, in part because of the discriminatory nature of the crimes. So white people use as much marijuana as black people, but black people go to jail 4, 5, 6
Way more,
times
right.
more. So that's a justice issue. But there are opportunities around cannabis for economic development. We're already seeing it in Ohio, too, of investments that are made into the cultivation and all the rest.
Very hard for minorities, black and brown. You know, some of the things, I mean, you have to have so many assets. You have to be able to show so much liquid. A lot of us don't have, but, you know, I think the majority of users.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I will say this,
Nah.
that we don't have to actually own the facilities. It's great if we can, but there's opportunities around marijuana as well besides just owning, like, owning a place where you can go, a dispensary. Like you can also have all kinds of accessories that can be used for that. You can do other things too, and I think people think that you have to own a dispensary, but we should be able to get money off of that as well. But I think,
Should be a lot easier to get in the game.
marketing companies, there's a lot of other things that people are doing to be involved in that industry too. So we need to make sure people are educated on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just marijuana. I mean, it's around the issues of getting of intentionally. Here's the underlying problem. We as a country have got to intentionally try to close the opportunity gap. These are structural issues that go back generations. And I just believe if the President of the United States is really intent on trying to make this happen, closing this gap, getting the early stage capital available for people of color to start businesses. And like I said, like getting this venture capital, there are ideas. There are people who want to start businesses in communities. We need to give them those opportunities, and we need to clean our communities up. I mean, one of the proposals I have is how do we get rid of blight in our communities?
Right.
How do we, we have people who in Youngstown, have to, and a lot of people think Youngstown's just a white community. It's 50% African American. And I've been representing them for 17 years in Congress. You can drive down a street and there's 8 dilapidated homes on your street. Reduces the value of your home. It's crime. We have a huge opiate epidemic. We've got to begin by cleaning up our country. We if we intentionally want to do that, how do you wire the country? Make sure there's access to the proper technologies, that kids have access in their schools. And the one thing I really want to talk to you guys about is my agenda around social and emotional learning in the schools. I know you have talked a lot about mental health promotion and mental health issues and getting good food to kids.
But yeah, I wrote a whole book about it, and Envy and Angela have a juice bar. Yeah.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah, I wrote a whole book about anxiety and mental health issues.
So I wrote a book called Healing America. I wrote it many years ago.
I love that word. I think that we all need to heal.
Yeah, and it's about the contemplative practice of mindfulness meditation that we are using in some schools, promoting social and emotional learning in the schools. You'll love to get totally geeked out on you. There's an Aspen report around social and emotional learning, Aspen Institute report. It is phenomenal. So when you address the social and emotional needs of children, you see in these programs an 11 percentile point increase in test scores, closes the achievement gap, 10% increase in good behavior, 10% decrease in bad behavior, 20% swing in the mood of the schools, because you're dealing with the kids' social and emotional state. And the brain, we're wired to learn through social interaction. And so when you teach kids, and I know you've talked about this a lot, when you teach kids how to de-escalate from fight or flight mode, it's actually a tool. We yell at kids to pay attention, but we never teach kids how to pay attention.
Yes.
So let's teach them these skills on how to deal with their emotions, how to de-escalate. Literally, you can get your brain out of fight or flight mode.
Right.
I think we need therapists in the public schools, and I think we need mental wellness centers in all the poor and disenfranchised areas in America.
And better nutrition.
No question. So
better food.
So this is my agenda. I will tell you, this is my agenda. I've been promoting social and emotional learning in the schools, and I also wrote a book about food, because if our kids aren't eating properly, if they're living in food deserts, if they're eating highly processed food, it diminishes their cognitive functions.
You came in here eating McDonald's.
I'm sorry?
You came in here eating McDonald's.
yeah, like Bill Clinton in the 90s on Saturday Night Live. Like, we need to really clean up our act with this eating stuff. But it's true. Like, I think we need to get back to the fundamentals. We get so complicated with the way we think about things. it can be simple and not simplistic, but cleaning these neighborhoods up, putting in robust urban agricultural programs, getting investment, teaching kids how to cook. I've got a bill that tries to put a salad bar in every school.
Right.
I think we need a school garden in every school. I think we need kids learning through business. You can tie it to the entire health curriculum. You can teach them how to do business, get the food, go market it, do farmers markets and all the rest. But we got to teach these kids. I mean, they don't know.
Some teachers don't even know.
No, well, I mean, it starts with...
and some parents aren't that healthy either, and I feel like that's behavior that is passed down too. And, because we do have a juice bar in Brooklyn, and Bedside, and I have a pressed juice business, and that's been important to me to kind of teach people the difference. Like, you have to know what's different between something that's all natural, that's organic, that is not genetically modified, and all of that. And some people don't know the difference.
Yeah.
They think, okay, I'm buying this because it's cheaper, because it is more expensive sometimes to buy things that are healthier for you.
Yeah.
But you can actually buy whole fruits and vegetables at a farmer's market, and that could be less expensive.
Yeah. It just needs to be accessible, and I think we need to teach our kids. I mean, if you look at now, half the country has either diabetes or prediabetes.
Right.
It's even higher in communities of color, and so these are driving up healthcare costs and diminishing our kids' ability to go and learn and have peak cognitive functioning. And so why wouldn't the federal government, and I will do this as president, we are going to clean up the blight. We're going to have a robust urban agriculture program. We're going to put social and emotional learning in all the schools. And
Does that mean therapists when you say social and emotional
well,
learning?
it could be counselors that are. I mean, I think we need therapists too, but I think the way
schools have always had counselors, but what do they do?
Well, they're going to learn social and emotional learning, and and this is embedded in the communities. It's embedded, so your after school program will reflect it. Your summer school programs will reflect it. Your boys and girls clubs, your YMCAs. You really want to knit this thing together so that these kids have a real support system around social and emotional health. It's not an add-on for teachers. And when you see the studies come back on this stuff, reduces teacher turnover, reduces teacher stress and burnout, increases teachers' wellness and their own satisfaction with their job. So the teachers start to embody these practices themselves, and then they teach it to the kids. And to connect these kids to each other, to connect them to their teachers, to connect them to their community is the best gift we can give them. And no kidding, their test scores go up when they feel loved and cared about and connected, and they start eating healthy food.
And pay teachers more.
Well, that's like a no-brainer. Of course we want to pay. I mean, my wife is a first grade teacher, so I'm all for paying teachers more. So on a personal level.
How does Tim Ryan plan to get enough votes to win the presidency when you couldn't garner support to beat Nancy Pelosi in a race for Speaker? Because you ran against her twice, right?
Just once.
Once, okay.
Yeah, two different games. I mean, that the Nancy Pelosi race was an inside game with just a couple hundred Democrats in Congress. This is a game, an election outside of that, talking to the people, and I'm talking about the issues that we just talked about around social and emotional learning, around a robust new program around agriculture, not just urban ag, but regenerative farming in rural areas, and trying to really bring this country together. And I actually think that someone coming from a community like mine, where we've experienced, people trying to say, the white worker and the black worker, they can't be together, and the white worker and the brown worker, they can't be together. And this whole idea of we're going to just divide the country has weakened us. And when you come from an area like mine, representing a diverse district, saying, no, we can't be divided. We got to come together. I mean, we actually need a president of the United States that comes maybe not from Youngstown, but from a place like Youngstown, that has seen the economic hardship, seen the opiate, seen the structural racism and how it traps people in communities. Somebody's got to do something about it. And I'm tired of having to explain to people what that's like. And I'm going to go out and make my case to the American people, and I think I'm going to have a heck of a good shot at winning this thing.
Do they want that from a white male, though? Because the Akron Beacon Journal said in a year when Democrats crave diversity, a candidate like Ryan, who's a white male, former high school football player with an affinity for sports metaphors, may not be what voters are looking for. What do you think of that?
Well, we're going to find out. I mean, all I can say is I care about working class people, white, black, brown, people who are just trying to make ends meet, and we stop talking about the real economic issues that people are facing every single day, people who take a shower after work and still can't get ahead. I'm fighting for those people, and I'm going to go out and make that case. I mean, everyone's, I love all the pundits and everything. They were the same ones told me I'd never win for state senate, I'd never win for Congress. So as a former athlete who uses sports metaphors,
I'm kind of disappointed. I haven't heard one since you've been here.
Well, they got me, afraid to even talk about it. I was going to talk about the Browns because
y'all look good. Y'all might be popping next year.
I'm telling you, I got a lot of talk about emotional scars. Try being a Cleveland Browns fan for 20 years.
I'm a Cowboys fan.
Yeah.
Well,
I know, but
Cavaliers fan. I mean, you got
Indians went to the World Series.
You know what I
wanted
to ask you?
Yeah.
One thing that does matter, since you do have experience, what are some things that we can look at in your record now as we're learning more about you that we can say, okay, he stood up for this, he introduced this legislation, this is why I would vote for him?
Yeah,
I would say a couple things. I would say look at Youngstown, Ohio. Look at Akron, Ohio. I sit on the Appropriations Committee. My real focus for vast majority, obviously every year, but it was how we can rebuild these communities who have been unplugged from globalization. I've brought back hundreds of millions of dollars to my community, and what we've done is position our community around the next generation of jobs and technology. I think President Trump talks a lot about the old economy, old politics. I'm talking about the new economy. So, for example, we have the first National Innovation Institute around manufacturing. We landed that a few years back, and in large part from the work that I was able to do with a great team that we had on the ground. But that is now the leading institute in the United States around additive manufacturing, which is like the 3D printers, but for industrial size, so for engine parts and airplanes.
I remember they had a whole thing with it.
Not for guns. This is more for manufacturing. That industry is going to create 3 to 5 million new jobs in the next 10 years. So what we've tried to do is place our community on the front edge of this new technologies coming. I want to do that for the entire country. I want to do that around electric vehicles. I want to do that around solar panels. I want to do that around wind. Same thing around social and emotional learning. I think it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. I got $1 million for us to try social and emotional learning in 2 of our schools, in Youngstown and Warren City schools. Youngstown kind of had a lot of problems, but Warren really stuck to it. And I will say that Warren, Ohio, before this program started, had 250, close to it, I'm going to be slightly off on these numbers, out of school suspensions. Last year they had 18, because we're learning how to do this. So on all of these issues, you look at the money I've got for blight removal and downtown river walks, amphitheaters, like really trying to rebuild the core of our cities and start cleaning things up. I've been on the front lines of doing this. But I sit here and I look at the power of the presidency and what a president could do if he intentionally or she intentionally tries to transform this country and make sure that people stop surviving. People want to thrive. People are just, fed up with
scratching and surviving.
Just scratching, man. They can't get ahead.
Yeah.
They just can't do it. Now they're working 2 jobs. Now they're working 3 jobs. Somebody gets sick. They got to worry about health care. Cardi B, she mentioned
Cardi B
me.
Just said she likes.
I knew you was gonna bring up your Cardi B endorsement.
Well,
you proud of that?
Well, you know why? My kids and my nieces and nephews think I'm cool now.
That's a good reason.
I went from being like the guy who wants to talk about the Aspen Institute report to like Cardi B.
Did you know who Cardi B was before that?
I had heard of her.
Okay.
Now, so how about this? I announce we do a big dinner, and we're filming my family to do like videos. So my dad's there. My dad is a 73-year-old white Irish German guy who he doesn't even really know a whole lot about 90s music. He gets his phone. He walks out. He says it's his granddaughter. So he goes out, and he comes back in. And he says, "Carpi tea?" I go, "What?" He goes, "Carpi tea." I go, "Pops, what are you talking about?" He goes, our granddaughter, she goes to Kent State. She just said Carpi T was like posting you on social media. Cardi B?
Cardi B.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So that's how I found out.
So let's talk about healthcare, because she seems to love your healthcare ideas. Now let's talk about your healthcare ideas.
Yeah. The bottom line is I've been a Medicare for All person since 2007. I think it's important that everybody has healthcare in the United States. That's it's affordable, accessible. There's going to be steps on how we get to that point, but we've got to get to the point where we have a public option for people to
I don't know why anybody could
into.
argue against that.
Because they're
Like,
making
how could
money.
you not want people to have health care?
Well,
Because you're messing up the
Like,
church's
affordable-
money.
Well,
That's
I
crazy
tell you
to
what.
me.
I tell you what. This gets back to the original conversation that we were having. The healthcare system is broken. I will be the only candidate talking about food and health as it regards to health care, because what we have now is a disease care system. We have a system that is like for sick care. So we're going to just, when you get sick, we're going to take care of you, as we should, and spend a lot of money. And here's the pharmaceutical industry saying, I'm going to get paid. Here's the healthcare system saying, I'm going to get paid. What I want to do is recognize that 75% of healthcare costs are from chronic diseases that are largely preventable.
Right.
So we're having the wrong conversation. We're having a conversation around disease care. The conversation needs to be on the front end about prevention. And where's that start? In our schools. Where's that start? In our communities.
Do you think the food industry and the healthcare industry are working hand in hand? Meaning, like, certain foods are making people sick, and then the healthcare industry
give them medicine?
Give them the medicine
That
to
whole
treat
got
it.
milk campaign used to
that-
be crazy to me.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what's going on behind the scenes. What I do know is they're making a lot of money, but I do see changes happening in some companies. There is a move. There is an industry around organics. There is an industry developing around fresh food, but it's got to be us. I mean, can you imagine if the president of the United States is talking? Look, and I'm not a prude. Like, I drink Miller Lite and watch the Browns, right? I mean, I'm not saying you.
I mean, you got to drink heavily when you watch the Browns.
Well, I mean, it was hard liquor there a few years back,
You should
but
get tequila.
yeah. But the reality, you don't have to be a prude about it, but it's got to be 70 or 80% of the time. We've all got to be like doing what's right. We've got to participate in our own healthcare. Participatory medicine has got to be key. So why don't we build incentives into the healthcare system that reward doctors? And Dr. Oz talks a lot about this, and Mark Hyman and others. Like, how do you reward doctors for keeping us healthy?
Right.
How do you reward patients for being healthy? How do you reward healthcare systems for keeping us healthy? Right now, the incentives are all, I get paid if someone gets sick and I get to keep treating them.
Yeah.
So how do we
Right.
flip that? And one of the bills I have is how do we continue to robustly teach doctors nutrition in med school? No, like, almost all medical schools do not reach the threshold of the number of hours they're supposed to be treating or teaching nutrition in medical schools. And I have a bill called the Enrich Act, which says these schools will help the schools hire teachers and give them some grant money, but they have to focus on nutrition so that your doctor can help you stay healthy, and then maybe the doctor could make a little piece of the action if you're healthy and we're not spending all the money on healthcare. We're going to spend $3 trillion a year on what they call non-communicable diseases, these 75%. It's going to be up to $3 trillion a year that we're going to be spending on this stuff.
I want to ask you a few more questions. You, Angela, you talked about legislation, but what legislation have you introduced in Congress that has specifically helped Black people?
If any.
Well, one, the Healthy Start Act, which reauthorizes investments into a healthy start for moms and kids. So a baby born in Iran will live longer than a black baby born in Youngstown, Ohio, because of the infant mortality issue. So I've been pushing early funding into making sure that women who are pregnant get the treatment and the care they need, and through the pregnancy. I mean, you see with African American women, they have a 300 to 400% more of a chance of dying during pregnancy or birth than a white woman of equal education and equal income. So that's one bill that I've pushed really hard, and I'm really excited about a new bill that has both the support of the NAACP and the FOP. That is a police immersion training bill.
I saw you announce that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. It helps really go all in on training cops on learning how to de-escalate a lot of these situations, and to have both the NAACP and the FOP on a bill. I want to signal to everybody that's how I want to govern the country.
You know what I always
gotta
thought would
come
be a
together.
great idea when it comes to police training as well? If police were required as part of their jobs to also do community service, where they had to, not on duty, be out with the community and doing things like to help them out, but also just interacting where it's not a situation where it's something that's aggressive.
Right.
So you're just out there meeting people,
Yeah.
being part of the community, doing things to help the community so that you can know people, they can know you. And I think that helps a lot too.
Yeah, no question. A few years back, it was a while, we got some money back when we had earmarks, and I could earmark money for certain projects. I got money for the Police Athletic League. I think this is something that we have to absolutely
Yeah, we need more of that, too.
Get back up off the
Absolutely.
ground. Makes all the sense in the world.
What's the Police Athletic League?
So it would
They
just
play basketball.
They play basketball. They have programs where they actually go into the community and they coach kids on how to play basketball, football, baseball, stickball. They would go to the park if they didn't have a facility, and they'd run tournaments all weekend long. So it was a good way to get the community involved with a lot of the things that the police are doing. But it wasn't like police were wearing uniforms. It was just, they were police officers, but they were just one of you guys for that weekend or that whatever. Those were great programs.
His dad was a cop. That's why he knows that.
okay.
I would have rather heard the answer from you, but since his dad is a cop, I
He
respect
was excited.
Yeah.
And he didn't want you talking about sports anymore. So.
Yeah, right.
What do you think of reparations, and will you sign on as a co-sponsor of HR 40?
Yeah.
What do you think of the whole conversation about reparations?
I think it's an important conversation, and I support the commission, and it's going to help us understand exactly what the numbers are that we're talking about.
So you will sign on as a sponsor
yeah,
of Rich 40?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And, on one hand, you're never going to be able to account for the
Atrocity that white people committed against black people.
the tragedy, the absolute tragedy.
It's okay to call it what it is.
Yeah. No, but there's no monetary number you're going to be able to put on it. I think that's going to be a very important part of the conversation. The reality of it is these problems are structural. Whether you're talking about the criminal justice system, you're talking about the education system, the issues are structural. You need more funding to the schools. You need less discriminatory sentencing practices, guidelines, however you want to say it. That's the heart of the matter, and those investments into those communities. I'm proposing I'm going to tie all this together around an urban Marshall Plan. Like, we're going to go all in to these communities. I've been watching this happen in cities like Youngstown and Akron for a long time. The disinvestment, both public and private, and it leaves people trapped in communities that they can't get out of.
Yes, America systemically put black people in some bad positions, so they needed to systemically do something to get them out.
Yeah,
it's really simple.
And it's not just we want to do it. It's like it's in all of our interest to do that. I mean, we're competing against China now. They got 1.4 billion people. We have 330 million people. We need to invest into ourselves, into our own country, and get people educated, skilled, healthy, and ready to compete with the Team USA jersey on. That means black, brown, gay, straight, like everybody needs to be on the team for us. And the President of the United States should be driving that conversation, because this is doable here. We can do this. I think it's time. I think when you look at the electorate, I think when you look at communities of color want it. I think when you look at working class whites want it. I think when you look at new immigrants to the country, they want it. These older communities that have been stuck now for 30, 40 years, they want it. It's like, okay, I think my job in this whole election is to say, can we please come together? White, black, brown, gay, straight, and do it. Let's go.
It sounds good, but like you mentioned earlier, and you talked about some of the low-income areas in Ohio, and you said the streets and the blocks look beat up. But a lot of times it's hard for minorities to get loans. It's hard for minorities to get loans to buy their own communities back. How can we help that? How can we start being able to walk into a building and get a loan and not say, okay, well, you live in this area, it's more difficult.
Yeah,
Your interest rates are a lot
issue.
higher because you live in this area.
Yeah. It's going to take investment in these communities. It's also going to take legislation that you can't do that. And I think that there is a government role in making that happen. But it's also around, if you have a house, I periodically go around town with the councilman, in one of my cities. So I went with Julius Oliver, who's a local councilman in Youngstown, Ohio, and we pulled into this house. And it was Mrs. Duke's house. I'd never met her. Now all of a sudden the congressman's walking up her driveway. She's out pulling weeds, and she's,
thinking she about to be evicted.
Yeah,
This white man in a suit is walking around.
Yeah, but fortunately, she recognized me. And so, we ended up, talking. It was the neighborhood's bad, dilapidated homes, grass overgrowth. We go into the house, beautiful house, very well kept. Her son came around. He had white paint on his arm. He was painting the house. She was spraying for ants. We go in. She said, I can't go out on my porch anymore and drink water after 5 o'clock. It's too dangerous.
Wow.
Now, her husband worked for was a sheriff's deputy. He died. She had his pension.
Mm-hmm.
This house was still a nice house. I went in, marble mantle, and, it looked like your grandma's house, but it was nice, hardwood. And she said, I can't get out of here. Like, I'm trapped. And, she was just really heartbroken about the whole thing. She asked her son, she said, look and see if we can sell this thing. And he came back and she said, tell him how much. He said, $4,000.
Ooh.
For the whole house?
For the whole house.
How many bedrooms?
Shut up, man.
It's because of the
That's
neighborhood.
because the neighborhood is so
Because of
bad,
the
nobody wants to
neighborhood.
live there.
I still want to know how many bedrooms. I might get it. He about to clean up the place. That's gentrification.
Yeah,
That's going to work. All right.
So you would buy this poor woman's house for $4,000. So
She wants to sell it?
not for $4,000.
Oh, okay. Well,
No.
Charlamagne,
Yeah, I
what's
got you.
wrong with you?
I got you.
I
see what
mean,
you're saying.
I tell you what, if you give her 50 for it, I'll make the deal here.
Yeah.
But the point is that this poor woman has done everything right. Her husband did everything right, and she is stuck in a neighborhood that she can't get out of, and that's
Right.
in the United States of America.
But how do we fix that? I look at Atlantic City. Atlantic City, they put up lists and try to encourage people to invest in Atlantic City. They give them tax abatements. They put the auction up there. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there, like Charlamagne just said, that can afford an investment for $4,000. People don't know about it. Are you guys willing to give abatements? Are you guys willing to give construction loans and construction grants to help? Those are the type of things that minorities need because they don't have long money. They have good heart. They want to buy it. They want to, but they just don't have it. A lot of times credit is bad. They're working check to check.
So there's been a systematic disinvestment into urban areas across the country.
On purpose?
On purpose over the last, how many years? 20 years. Well, really since 1980, since the whole anti-government thing came along. It's time for reinvestment. And so if you go to Mrs. Duke's neighborhood and you take down 10 dilapidated homes, all of a sudden her house goes to $8,000 maybe all of a sudden. And now it's you're moving in the right direction. If you invest and you got community development block grants is a big program that we really need to probably triple the size of. But you reinvest back into these communities. You give the local municipality the ability to make those investments. You make sure that there's broadband in these communities and in the schools, and you do what we're talking about around urban agriculture. Now and then what I've mentioned with the venture capital, you start driving investment into these communities so that you're boosting the tax revenue in the community. So now the city has more money. I also have a proposal to study moving federal jobs outside of Washington, D.C. There's 300,000 federal jobs in Washington, D.C. If we could get 10% of them, which is 30,000 to start, you start moving 500 or 1,000 jobs at a time into these different communities, you're going to start to boost that tax revenue up. So all of a sudden, you put 500 jobs into downtown Youngstown, people making 60, 70 grand a year, maybe more. It's a better life for them because they're not living in D.C., one of the most expensive cities in the world. It's a force multiplier for taxpayers because you're going to get jobs in these communities, boosting their tax revenue that they can then reinvest back into the community.
Creating the middle class.
It's going to take this effort. This is why I get so upset. The president is so lazy. It's like you think like GM left, right? We lost our third shift. Trump picks up his thing, gives the little text. GM, get back to work. I'm going to strip your incentives for electric vehicles, and that was the extent of his effort.
Crazy.
Well, he don't know.
Right? Roll up your sleeves and get to work. Well,
Yeah, he really don't know. I mean, he's really not educated on none of that shit.
I keep hearing about
true.
some program that he did with taxes in blight areas. You know what I'm talking about? With if you buy a house in one of these opportunity zones.
Yeah.
So what is that? I'm just
This was the only good part of the entire tax code. The tax cut was the creation of these opportunity zones where people could put money into a opportunity fund, and then the fund, it's slow money. I mean, you get, if you leave it in 5 years, you get a reduction of your capital gains tax. If you leave it in 7 years, you get a further reduction. You leave it in 10 years, I think you don't pay anything.
No tax, no property gain tax.
Yeah.
If I recall, yep.
So if you leave it in there for 10 years, and then the funds can only go into opportunity zones. So each governor drew like tracks in neighborhoods and towns that money could go into. And I think that is actually a really good way of moving forward, because we've got to get out of this too, as Democrats. Oh, the government's going to solve everything. Like, government's the only way to solve this problem. We've got to figure out how we have a balance between the free enterprise system and the government. That relationship that is really important. And we got one side now that thinks the government can do everything, and we got one side now that thinks, just cut taxes for rich people and it'll all trickle down and into the Mrs. Duke's neighborhood. And the reality of it is, it takes community development block grants, working with the telecommunications company to make sure that these communities are wired. You need sidewalks. You need the police athletic league. You need to fix the systemic racism in the communities. You need to invest in the schools and pay teachers more and do social and emotional learning and urban ag. It's like, this is hard. So all the more reason we've got to come together. But it's got to be free enterprise coming in too. People want to go to work for a private company. They don't necessarily want to work for the government.
Right.
Do you think Democrats have done right by the black community?
No. Not nearly enough. Not nearly enough. And I think it's time. I think it's time. And I would be honored to be someone who would drive that and solve this problem. We've got a lot of work to do. But I think it's really important to come and say, we are going to make this happen. We're going to unite the country, and we're going to solve this really big structural problem. And it's going to reduce the stress and anxiety of millions and millions of Americans to know that, hey, the team's coming back together,
Is it okay to directly address the black community? Because for so long, so many Democrats seem like they haven't done that. Like, if you talk about, specific agendas for the black community, they'll start talking about all Americans. And you blatantly just said they have not done enough for black people.
No.
Yeah.
We what's there to be ashamed of saying that? I mean, we've got wounds we need to heal. We've got investments we need to make. And you can't heal until you acknowledge and start really trying to repair.
Yeah.
Really start trying to do something about it. And what I want to do is say, I see social and emotional learning, I see it as a social justice issue. I see urban ag and getting salad bars in the schools and school. That to me is a social justice issue.
Yeah,
it's a 2019, 2020 social justice issue. But this is proved to work, and I want it to be accessible to all our kids.
What's the last black movie you seen, Tim Ryan?
Last black movie.
You ever seen Roots? Birth of a Nation? Minister Society?
Roots was a long
Coming
time
to
ago.
America?
Coming to America about 15 times.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the last black? You don't remember the last black movie you seen?
Black Panther.
I did see Black Panther. Yeah, Black Panther. And my son runs around with his Black Panther outfit on.
That's probably the last one you saw.
Yeah.
Yeah. Name 3 black people that you would put in your cabinet. In what position?
I'm going to out some people here.
That's fine.
Probably, but one would be Kendrick Meek, who's an old buddy of mine from South Florida.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure, where he would be. Greg Meeks, I think, would be someone that I would put in. Like, I don't want to get these guys in trouble now, but Greg is a really dear friend of mine. And Marcia Fudge, she's from Cleveland.
Okay.
A very dear friend of mine. We've been in some serious political battles together. Joyce Beatty, she would be a terrific cabinet member. So there's, my cabinet will reflect America.
I'm just glad you said I don't want to get those guys in trouble and not those boys. That could have been a headline.
Stupid, man. You are stupid.
Why?
And they weren't all men, by the way.
They weren't all men.
They
You're
weren't
right.
all
You're right.
women.
You also told CNN that you're concerned that Democrats view socialism more positively. Did I quote you correctly?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think we can fall into thinking that, everybody has a different definition of socialism. But in my view of it, I think not appreciating the value of the free enterprise system is a very dangerous proposition for us. I mean, I'm for an active government. I've been on the Medicare for All bill since 2007. These things I'm talking about here, these are government investments we need to make. But I just don't want us being hostile to the free enterprise system. And I do get concerned sometimes that we come off as hostile. I mean, we want entrepreneurship and innovation. We're talking about black entrepreneurship. I mean, that's free enterprise. But they don't have access to capital, so maybe the government has to play a role in reducing any kind of discrimination in the system.
Well, they have the grants. They definitely have the grants. Even with the the fact that a lot of these big businesses and these $1 million and $1 billion companies don't pay taxes. That's crazy to me.
1,000%.
They make a zillion off of people, and they pay not a cent to tax.
Right.
And they get all kinds of incentives to come to a city and not have to pay tax. Come to a state and not have to pay taxes still, which is crazy.
Even the fact when you talked about the back to the real estate, you talked about the opportunity zone. A lot, like what Charlamagne said, a lot of times, a lot of these governments, they give these investors all these properties to fix up a neighborhood, kind of like what they did in Brooklyn and kind of like what they did in Newark and Jersey City and Hoboken and that area that lady lives in, their $4,000 houses. I'm sure somebody will buy 30 of those houses for $4,000, redo that area, kick those low-income people out, and then that'll be the next Brooklyn or the next Hoboken or the next whatever, and start charging people rent $3,000-$4,000 of apartment, and that's what we have. That's what we have to watch out, and make sure that money goes back to our communities and the people that are living there, and not just pushed out. We've seen it in Brooklyn, we've seen it in Harlem, we've seen it in
don't make the
South
neighborhood
Side,
nice and kick us out.
Amen. Amen. Well, even you like San Francisco, I'm sure it's the same around here, where people got to take a bus in for
to go to work,
a 2 hour to go to work. They can't even afford to
it's
live
so
in
expensive.
Even
if you're middle class, you can't afford to live in San Francisco.
No. And that's the concentration of wealth. That's because this whole we're going to cut taxes for the rich and everything's going to trickle down. What it leads to at the end of the day is what we got now. Top 1% control 90% of the wealth in the United States. That is obscene. That doesn't even make any sense on any level. And that's where we are. And then we just gave, Republicans just gave a huge round of tax cuts to those people. And meanwhile, we can't take down homes in Mrs. Duke's neighborhood or provide enough revenue for early stage, capital for people to start a business in Youngstown, Ohio.
Since you mentioned the tax cuts, I see a lot of people complaining. I don't know what I'm getting back or not, or have to pay in taxes. I don't know what I have to pay, but I see a lot of people complaining about taxes. Now, break down, because you said the wealthy people got tax cuts, so that means the average person actually ended up having to pay more taxes or not get any money back, which they were accustomed to doing this year.
So what they did was we tried to make this point that the corporate tax cut was permanent. Okay. The top rate tax cut was made permanent, but the tax cuts for all the lower brackets phase out. So it's higher last year, lower this year, lower next year. So it phases out. So in 5-6 years, the middle class tax cut completely goes away, but the corporate and the top bracket rate is permanent forever. I mean, as long as the law goes.
So it'll be worse next year.
It's going to get progressively worse. Yeah, I mean, my father-in-law called me. He got $2,000 back. He's an old former steel worker. He got $2,000 back last year. He had to pay $150 this year. Wow. So again, these are working class families.
I think it was last month I heard you say Democrats got to get back to talking about real issues. So I appreciate the fact that you've been here and you've been actually talking about issues and not just sitting up here on an anti-Trump agenda.
Oh yeah,
I do appreciate that.
I'm tired of him. I mean, it's just he's a one-trick pony. He just keeps doing the same thing over and over. And the concern really is, I think we've got to really focus on an agenda. His only goal is to win the 24-hour news cycle. And what I worry about is, you look at our top competitor. It's Russia. Like they want to keep dividing us, and then it's China. And
Russia is our leader.
Well, there's some truth to that. And China has a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan, a 30-year plan, a 50-year plan, and a 100-year plan. In America, we're playing in a 24-hour news cycle, and we're losing. I mentioned electric vehicles. We're losing the future in electric vehicles. We're losing the future in solar. We're losing the future in wind. We're losing the future in additive manufacturing. They're building islands in the South China Sea. They're signing long-term contracts for raw materials in Africa that are really essential raw materials for our phones, for defense capabilities, all kinds of things. They have a huge infrastructure bill called initiative called Belt Road Initiative that goes from Northeast China all the way into Europe, and like rail lines and oil and gas lines and bases in Africa. Like they're moving. As we are retreating from the world, they are moving into the world.
It sounds to me like America needs to be under the rule of China and not Russia.
Well, China is benefiting from what Russia is doing. Like Russia online, they come at us. They make sure we're divided, in a million different ways.
Right.
And meanwhile, China's just chug, chug, chug. And now that's what I'm saying. And the president's like tweeting about Barbara Bush and John McCain and Rep. Omar and all of these things and race baiting, LeBron James, Maxine Waters. I mean, he just finds anything to divide. It's like we are losing because of our division. And we've got to come together and around, I think, a fresh agenda that I'm offering.
Why does Tim Ryan think he can beat Donald Trump in a fist fight?
He's an athlete.
Let's start with I didn't have 3 buckets of Kentucky Fried Chicken today.
Hey, okay.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's not in the best condition.
So
what do you think?
Oh, I think you take him out just off conditioning alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if he falls on you,
that would be the only thing. I'd have to quickly get around him somehow.
Quickly.
Yeah.
You could take him in a fist fight though.
I'm a lover. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Give him a hug.
Okay, well, 2020 election. How can you beat him?
He made a lot of promises that he didn't complete, and really didn't even try. I mean, that's my pitch is that he didn't even try. He didn't create all these problems. These problems have been going on for a long time, structural economic problems, but he doesn't care enough to try.
One thing he's trying to do is get this wall built, right? Because that was one of his promises. What are your thoughts on immigration and what our policy should be here?
We have got to be strong on the border. We got to be smart. Like he wants to build a wall in the middle of the Rio Grande River. I mean, that just doesn't even make any sense. He wants eminent domain property in the southern part of the southern states for ranchers and farmers. That doesn't even make any sense. We have technology today. We have to be strong on the border. I come from a state that's been ravaged by the opiate crisis, and so we need to make sure that these drugs aren't coming into our country. Of course, we don't want terrorists to come into our country. We've got to be smart about it. 90% of the drugs come in through the ports of entry or the water or the U.S. Postal Service is where all the fentanyl comes in from. So let's be smart about this, and he's not doing that. So I think we do have to be strong on those things, but we need to have a compassionate immigration system where we have a process where people can come in legally and we can facilitate that process. I think we should be a strong enough country to accept refugees who are fleeing from countries where gangs are literally running the country. And just to show you how disconnected the administration is, there's not even an ambassador in Honduras. We don't even have an ambassador.
That's crazy.
Like the top 8 positions, 8 of the top positions in the Homeland Security Department, senior level officials, aren't even filled. So how serious are you? And you had a Republican House and a Republican Senate for 2 years before the Democrats took over, and you didn't do anything about this stuff. So it just shows he's playing politics with it. He thinks it's a good election issue. But I'm going to run on he has not delivered. He made these promises. I have an agenda. We're going to plug the middle America back into the economy. We're going to plug communities of color back into the economy. We're going to plug rural America back into the economy. We can do all this. When you talk about food, farmers haven't made a profit in 5 years. If we go to them with an agenda saying, let's talk about regenerative agriculture. Let's talk about no-till farming. Let's talk about cover crops. How can we facilitate you moving into producing more real food, like healthy food? How do we do that? So that this is an agenda that we can put together that will help communities of color, rural America, working class manufacturing towns, because it's going to benefit everybody by reinvesting back in the company. It's right there for us to do it. We just got to come together.
Yeah, I'm hungry. I want a salad right now.
I am myself.
Yes. Thank you, Tim Ryan.
What's all that back there? I mean, do you get into that
You want a
stuff?
shot?
No.
Don't ask about it if you're not going to partake now.
I'm
Give a
saying,
Miller
like,
Lite, perhaps.
Do you want a shot?
No, I'm good.
You sure?
I'm good. Yeah,
we got cognac, we got wine, we
got
got
light,
rum,
we got dog.
whatever you need.
We'll
Yeah,
have one and then
mayonnaise.
do the whole interview all over again.
Let's
and see
do
what
it.
happens.
Then you'll really tell me if you can take Trump in a fist fight. Yeah.
All right. Well, Tim Ryan, we appreciate you for joining us.
Thank you.
so much.
Thanks for having me.
Good luck.
Thank
It's
you.
The Breakfast Club. Good morning.